Clintons. Why do so many people, when it comes down to Clintons, get suicided? We hear the story.
I don't have an answer for that, I can give you my opinion.
Yeah, that's what I want to hear. Why we hear these stories, and then I want to ask you whether you feel Trump has any kind of a involvement with Epstein, not in regards to business, but with women, because I have my own theory there as well. But let's start off with the Clintons first.
Okay, so the Clinton stuff is really complicated, and even I, like with the book, I sort of saved some of that stuff for last, and it probably should be its own book, because this Mark Middleton guy, most of his meetings were with Mark Middleton. You have these visitor logs came out right last December. It's 17 visits. It's much more than 5 with Mark Middleton, and then just a few months later, Mark Middleton dies in Little Rock, Arkansas. He was allegedly found hanging by the neck with an extension cord around his neck and a shotgun wound to the chest, and it was labeled a suicide. A local court in Arkansas said that no media front taken at the scene, photos, videos, anything is allowed to be released to the public.
Hold on, what? He was hanging.
Supposedly,
but with a shotgun
this is again from the Daily Mail citing local law enforcement that it's very crazy.
Listen, if you can commit suicide by hanging yourself and shooting yourself with a shotgun in the chest, you're a magician is what you are. I mean, you're in a league of your own to be able to do that.
This is right after it comes out that he's, meeting the guy that met with Epstein a bunch at the Clinton White House. But it's even crazier than that, because once you start looking into who Mark Middleton was at the White House, it gets crazy really fast. I'll give you an example. George W. Bush comes into office. Are you familiar with the first time Bush invoked executive privilege? Among other things, I think there were 3 things in the particular document that was, that invocation. But one of those 3 was all documents about Mark Middleton not going to Congress, which was investigating Mark Middleton. Why did Bush step in to protect aid to the chief of staff of the White House for Clinton, who's normally, he's not a big fish, right?
Yeah, what was the
Why is Bush stepping in for that?
Yeah, what's your theory?
Well, if you look into why Mark Middleton was infamous at that time and why he was being investigated, it's remembered really only by U.S. conservatives today, and they refer to it as Chinagate, which is kind of a largely forgotten political scandal. It's insane once you get into it. I personally think
Chinagate.
I think Chinagate's kind of a misnomer. You do have China involved, but really it's the same. It's some of the families that backed Bill Clinton when he was governor of Arkansas, the Riotti family, Jackson Stevens, these types of figures. When Bill Clinton becomes president, they have a lot of interest in China stuff. And mainly it looks sort of like a lot of tech transfer stuff to China. And so conservatives at the time said it was basically the Clintons selling out U.S. national security on a major scale to the Chinese government, or mainly to firms that were, state-backed and tied up with the Chinese military. And Mark Middleton was one of the guys at the center of this. And Epstein's meeting with him at the same time that Chinagate's active. And oddly enough, in the same period of time, and this is why it's so crazy, Jeffrey Epstein, on behalf of Leslie Wexner, is involved in moving an airline called Southern Air Transport from Miami, Florida to Columbus, Ohio to run cargo for the Limited. And sorry, I got away from the microphone. And that's the airline that used to be Air America, the CIA airline. Southern Air Transport was involved in the Iran-Contra stuff, moving stuff, the Mena, Arkansas, Barry Seal, the cocaine stuff, all of that was Southern Air Transport. And then just a few years later, it becomes the airline of the Limited, and it's not going from Miami to Latin America anymore. It's going from Columbus, Ohio, involved with Epstein and Wexner. It's going to Hong Kong. And this is the guy, at the same period of time, he's meeting with the Chinagate guy. There's a lot of really crazy stuff here, and honestly, it would take the whole podcast to unravel it all. I've tried to do my best in the book, but there's really a lot more there, and it's very crazy. And the other guy at the center of this was Commerce Secretary Ron Brown, who agreed to cooperate with an investigation into a lot of this stuff, and then he ends up dead in a plane crash that kills a bunch of people in the Commerce Department that are at the exact part of Commerce, ITA, at the Commerce Department, that was basically the department most targeted by this particular group for Chinagate.
Is this the one where 34 people died and they said there was a radar failure, and then the next day the radar failure guy was killed or suicide?
He was shot in the chest and it was ruled a suicide.
That's just so.
It was in Croatia. Ron Brown,
my God.
after he agreed to investigate, was told he needed to go on a urgent trade mission to Croatia, and that's when the crash happens. And I think actually Maxine Waters at the time requested there be further investigation because he was found with an odd wound in his head that was consistent with a gunshot wound, and the X-rays disappeared, and a lot of crazy stuff.
Maxine Waters wanted it to be investigated.
Yeah, well, actually, like when Gary Webb wrote, Dark Alliance and all
Right.
this stuff, she also called for there to be investigation, but that doesn't mean it went anywhere,
Maxine Waters, Congresswoman.
Well, I think she was a bit different in the 90s than she is now, yeah.
No question about it.
Let me just bring this down to earth for a second, because obviously we can go the whole Charlie Day.
Yeah, but the Clinton
always-
stuff's really crazy,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
All these theories and the stuff that we're hearing, and we had a whole conversation about distrust of the media. The stories about politics and Clintons and the media and the lies and the money and not trusting what you're seeing, not taking things at face value. How should the average person, I'm just a normal American, I'm just a normal citizen, paying my bills, got my family, how should they process just the news, in your opinion?
You mean like mainstream media news?
Yeah, just, living my life. I'm just hearing, doing what I'm doing.
I think mainstream media has evolved a lot over the past few decades, right? I think, I've been out of the U.S. This is my first time back in the U.S. in like 8 years. My parents, I was at their house a few days ago. They watch the evening news all the time, like ABC. And when they're talking about a government story, they just cite the government sources, and that's all they say. They don't, look to see if it's true. They don't do any sort of watchdog stuff. They're just telling you what the official story is about really anything. And, to me, that's being more of a stenographer than being a journalist.
I don't want to be a normal person right now. I want to be an abnormal person and go back to Clinton. So let's go back to Clinton's. Okay, so we did Middleton. We did Ron Brown. Who else? When you see the link to these guys, Esther, you got a few of these guys that you can.
I mean, it's so nuts. I mean, I would encourage people to read this part of the book because there's so much detail. It's so convoluted and insane when you get into the stuff about this, and even the congressional reports that were done about Chinagate. I mean, it's totally insane what happened. It's very illegal, and there was a focus on the illegal campaign donations, but it was basically like pay-for-play politics. But it was pay-for-play politics where these illegal campaign donations were being obtained from non-U.S. citizens. And it was basically buying influence of the Commerce Department that seems to have been signing off on basically tech transfers of sensitive military and other types of technology to our ostensible adversary, and when it wasn't supposed to be sent over there, and also stuff about China's trading status, like most favored nation trading status, because Clinton campaigned on playing hardball with the Chinese about that stuff, and he totally reversed. Right. And a lot of this is because of this one family that backed his political career going way back, named the Riyadis, that are actually Indonesian, but they're ethnic Chinese, and they have a lot of business interests in all of Southeast Asia. They're very big. They're called the Lippo Group. And the Lippo Group and Jackson Stevens, these guys have a relationship with BCCI that we talked about earlier back in the 1980s, and actually tried to save the BCCI Hong Kong branch before its collapse. And that's when they went into business with some of these Chinese government-owned firms. And that's where Chinagate really starts, and it gets really crazy from there on out. But even not talking about Chinagate anymore, you look at the first time Epstein went to a Clinton fundraiser, it was supposed to be for the White House Historical Association, nominally a fundraiser so Hillary Clinton could redecorate parts of the White House. I feel crazy talking about it just because it's so insane. But this fundraiser Epstein was involved in, he was one of the donors to that. You also have one of the guys instrumental in BCCI stuff, like Clark Clifford, who was in the Carter administration and played a major role in BCCI's entry into the U.S. financial system. And then you have a guy named C. Gerald Goldsmith, who tried to run for mayor of Palm Beach once, who has a bunch of ties to offshore banking complex, organized crime. I mean, a lot of the guys, not everyone obviously, but some of the guys that attended this fundraiser are financial guys like that, right? And this fundraiser ends up in Vince Foster's suicide note.
What does that mean?
Are you familiar with Vince Foster?
Yeah, of course.
He was White House counsel. And
For Clinton?
Yeah, and he died. And there's a lot of speculation about what really happened there. Because, he supposedly shot himself in the mouth, but there's no blood at the scene, right? And the autopsy report said it was a mouth-to-neck wound, and then they changed it You know, on some pages it says that, on some pages it says, like, you know, it was a regular gunshot wound. And then the people that were at the scene are advised about the autopsy late, and they show up and all the part of the mouth and neck, the palate, all this stuff is just taken out of Vince Foster so they can't look at it. And you know, there's a lot of weird stuff going on there. I mean, I know, you know, the specifics about the death in the book and why people suspect something, but it's pretty much a matter of record that when police went into Vince Foster's office after his body was found, there was nothing in his briefcase, and then somehow, like 36, I think, hours later, the White House claims there was a suicide note that Vince Foster left. And it was apparently Hillary Clinton's office that was responsible for finding that suicide note after this extensive delay. And the only mention of Hillary Clinton in that suicide note is related to this White House Historical Association fundraiser.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click.
The 80s. So is that pretty much all we know about what happened with him in the 80s? Let's keep going back to the 80s. So is that pretty much all we know about what happened with him in the 80s?
With the financial bounty hunter stuff? Well, the other thing is, too, right? So, you know, Bill Casey had this relationship with Bear Stearns. He's CIA director. Epstein leaves, and then he teams up with someone like Adnan Khashoggi. And then around the same time, two other people take on Adnan Khashoggi as clients. Robert Keith Gray, who worked very closely with Bill Casey on the Reagan campaign, and Roy Cohn, the lawyer, who also worked very closely with Bill Casey on the Reagan campaign. And as I note in volume 1 of my book, both of those men have very extensive ties to sexual blackmail.
Roy Cohn does.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Totally.
Now, Roy Cohn was a lawyer for a lot of mobsters, for many of the mobsters.
Yes.
And many powerful people in New York. He was the guy you got when, you know, you needed somebody to take care of you. Now, is Roy Cohen's story at all linked to J. Edgar Hoover, or no? Is there any connection between the two?
Yeah, I mean, I write about it pretty extensively. They were very close, and you know, even Roy Cohn's probably one of his best-known biographers, Nicholas von Hoffman, that wrote Citizen Cohn, just couldn't really even explain why the official story of J. Edgar Hoover and Roy Cohn's meeting. He just found it very odd because it was so uncommon at that time for someone to just waltz in to J. Edgar Hoover's office and have that kind of access to him right away. But there's been several authors, and well, I document this all in volume 1 pretty extensively, that point to there having been some sort of relationship previously, that they had met previously through some sort of weird sexual, it seems to have been a sexual blackmail operation, and Roy Cohn later apparently admitted this to an NYPD detective. There was some sort of sexual blackmail thing going on that entrapped J. Edgar Hoover, and Roy Cohn participated, not necessarily in entrapping J. Edgar Hoover, but they had these sex parties, right? And so J. Edgar Hoover was seen at these, Roy Cohn was seen as these, and a guy that was close to both Hoover and Cohn, Louis Rosenstiel, who was a liquor baron of that particular area, was also sort of in this same circuit, and it's alleged that this all took place at the Plaza Hotel.
It's important to say this real quick while you're going through this. Everything that you write about is primary sources, right? It's not, for the most part, you're going through primary sources.
Or, you know, so in the case of this, a lot of it comes from books, different books written by people that are sourced that way from interviews and things like that.
Got it.
But okay. Yeah, I mean, anyone that looks in the book and goes through the footnotes of what I write about is going to find like very high quality sourcing.
Sure. So with Roy Cohn and J. Edgar Hoover, so you're not saying Roy Cohn was involved in the sexual blackmail against J. Edgar Hoover is why, you know, the mob was able to say, so Roy wasn't involved at all to corner J. Edgar Hoover so he can help the mob. That was not the connection.
Not necessarily, but they seem to have been in this, they attended these same sex parties that the mob was apparently using to blackmail people. And when Roy Cohn admitted his involvement, he apparently admitted to this NYPD Vice Squad detective that he was involved in these kind of operations, but that he only did it because he had been entrapped. Originally, so this NYPD detective had like when I interviewed him, he expressed us like some sympathy towards Cohn, like he felt bad for him. But Cohn did this stuff because he was apparently entrapped at some point. And you know, you have to keep in mind this is a period of time when it's very difficult to be a gay man in D.C. So, a lot of this stuff is sort of like underground. And, if it were to come out that they were homosexual, it could have ended their political careers.
Both
right?
of them, him and J. Edgar Hoover.
Oh, absolutely.
Roy
and
Cohen
that's why
was,
the blackmail was so effective, I
right,
think,
absolutely.
in this period.
And by the way, even Roy Cohen's assistant, who was with him, they call him, he was his lover. He died in 1984 from AIDS. That's Roy Cohen's assistant who died in 1984 from AIDS. And that's the AIDS pandemic where, everybody was talking about.
Roy Cohen also died from AIDS.
You're right, I know. But, the point being is his assistant died from it, and then boom, the same thing happened with him.
Are the stories with J. Edgar Hoover, he was the director of the CIA?
FBI.
I'm sorry, FBI. The stories about cross-dressing and high heels, how much truth is in that?
Okay, so there's a couple different sources from that. So one is Susan Rosensteel, or I think that's her name if I'm not mistaken. It's Louis Rosensteel's fourth wife is a source for that. And then there was a separate source. There were 2 or 3 separate sources unrelated to Susan Rosensteel that corroborated that claim.
So when there's that many sources, it's almost like when there's smoke, there's fire. How much?
Well, it's when it's corroborated, I feel like then it's possible to report it. People can make their own conclusions. There's some people I think that have a very vested image in the image of Hoover that we're all
FBI
told.
director,
So there'll be people, it doesn't matter how much you corroborate it. There'll be people who won't
Do you
believe
believe
it.
that, Pat?
That what?
About J. Edgar Hoover and cross-dressing and
If I'm going to put odds, nothing is 100% because I wasn't there to witness it while he was getting it on, but I would say 90%.
Oh, that high?
I think so. I don't think it's I don't think it's a issue anymore.
His secret life with like Clyde Tolson and that he was a homosexual and all of this is well known. Wow. And there's even been like Bill Clinton speeches from the 90s where he sort of references that about J. Edgar Hoover and everyone laughs in the room, right? So there may be some stuff that isn't known necessarily to the American public, but like in these elite circles in DC, stuff gets out, right?
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to
You know that the first person outside of me to get a look at geometric unity was Jeffrey Epstein. How did he know I was working on this? I don't know.
So your ideas that formed geometric unity was something that his eyes has seen?
I was pushed to talk to Jeffrey Epstein as one of the only people who could help me. No, listen to this.
How does this connect?
Okay, well, first of all, my old synagogue, my old shul, was the conservative minyan at Harvard Hillel. And I believe it's called Rosofsky Hall, after Henry Rosofsky in the economics department, who was a Japan scholar, if I'm correct. And he became provost or dean of Harvard. I believe that was built with Jeffrey Epstein's money. And I wondered, in part, whether the Jewish students at Harvard all sort of passed through a bottleneck of Harvard Hillel. So that was something I found very curious, but I don't know much about it. I also found that Jeffrey Epstein hanging around scientists, I don't think that either you or Joe exactly, got me correct in your last interchange.
For the record, for people who haven't listened to the Joe Rogan program, Joe has claimed that Eric Weinstein was the only person who has gotten laid.
Paid.
Paid.
And you said you also got paid as a young man, right?
I believe the word was laid, but allegedly.
My hearing isn't so good at age 55.
Yeah.
All right. Leaving that aside.
Yes.
What was Jeffrey Epstein doing hanging around all of these scientists? I don't think that was the same program that was about compromising political leaders and business people and entertainment figures. I think these are two different programs that were being run through one individual. And Joe seemed to think that I didn't think he was smooth. I thought he was glib. I think what Joe is really trying to get at is that I found his mysticism meretricious. He had an ability to deflect every conversation that might go towards revealing that he didn't know what he was talking about. Every time you started to get close to something where the rubber hit the road, the rubber wouldn't hit the road.
And yet, can you help me untangle the fact that you thought deeply about the physics of the nature of our universe, and Jeffrey Epstein was interested?
How did he know? I wasn't really talking about this stuff until, even my close friends didn't really know what I was up to.
And yet you're saying he did not have sufficient brilliance to understand when the rubber hit the road. So why did he have sufficient interest and
I'll
curiosity?
tell you what I thought. I've been waiting to find out, does my government even know I exist?
Do you have an answer to that question?
I have, a couple times the government has reached out to me. In general, there is zero interest in me, like less than zero interest. I find that fascinating.
As far as you know, right? I mean,
well, that's what I'm trying to say. The question about not being able to see through a half-silvered mirror, you don't know what's going on behind the half-silvered mirror. To you, it's all you see is your reflection.
But your intuition still holds. Like, this is where I've mentioned that this is where I'll say naive, dumb things, but I still hold on to this intuition that I'm not confident in this, but I'm lean towards that direction, that Jeffrey Epstein is the source of evil, not something that's underlying him.
You have a bias. It's different than mine. Our Bayesian priors are tutored by different life experiences.
Yeah.
If I was mostly concerned, like Sam Harris is concerned, that people fill their heads with nonsense, I would have a very strong sense that people need order in the world, that they take mysterious situations, they build entire castles in the air, and then they go move in if they really get crazy. You know, the old saying is that neurotics build castles in the air and psychotics move in. Coming from a progressive family, we had a different experience. It's really weird when the government is actually out to get you, when they actually send a spy, when they actually engage in disinformation campaigns, when they smear you. And if you've ever had that brought to bear on your family, you have a Howard Zinn sort of understanding of the country, which is different than having a, wow, do people believe crazy stuff because they watch too much TV? And both of these things have some merit to them, but it's a question of regulated expression. When do you want to express more Sam Harris, and when do you want to express more Howard Zinn?
And you can express both, correct? One human being can express both?
Sure, but there's a trade-off between them. In other words, most people, like the Michael Shermers of the world, are going to tilt very strongly to extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Right.
And author of the new book, The Price. Emeritus professor at Harvard Law School and author of the new book, The Price of Principle, Alan Dershowitz, joins us now to talk about his new book. Professor, welcome.
Thank you so much.
So one thing I learned while reading this is your 50th book, which I thought was a staggering figure.
Well, I'm up to 51 now. I'm about halfway through it. So I'm turning 84 next week. So my goal is 10 more.
10 more. So what's the message? You've talked a lot publicly about your cancellation and how that has affected you personally. And what is the message that you're relaying in this one?
That we've lost the idea that principles are important, that we've lost the idea that nonpartisan approaches to the Constitution are important, that today everything is get Trump. I'm not a Trump supporter. I voted against him twice. I'm looking forward to an opportunity to vote against him the third time. But I demand that efforts to get him be consistent with the Constitution. They're trying to deny him the right to have a lawyer. And the attack on me is part of that. I now get phone calls 3 o'clock in the morning from people threatening me and threatening my family. I can't speak in the library. My books aren't carried in the library. Once I defended Trump, the library in Chilmark suddenly stopped carrying any of my books. They had 20 of my books before. Then I wrote 9 since, and none were covered. So, this is not about me. I have a thick skin. This is about my family. This is about the people who want to hear me speak. The hard left is engaging in new McCarthyism, just McCarthyism. It's the way lawyers, civil liberties lawyers who defended communists in the 1950s were treated, and it's unacceptable. I'm going to fight back. Most people who are treated like this just take it and go away. And my advice from many of my friends was just be quiet, it'll disappear. No. I care too much about the Constitution. That's why I wrote my book, The Price of Principle. I'm fighting back. I name names. I talk about people. I talk about episodes. I talk about efforts to silence me. I will not be silenced.
Yeah, and if you isolate to the Trump case, I think you'll find agreement. Especially, it's a story about the downfall of groups like the ACLU and the sentiment that used to back. You've been affiliated with the ACLU going back years. The sentiment and the American sentiment that used to back groups like the ACLU. The book is also, though, about cancellations over Trump, cancellations over Epstein. There's a sentence in your book. You say, "I challenge anyone to offer a substantive criticism of anything I did in either of those cases that warrants criticism or cancellation." So sticking on the criticism point, you've said yourself that you regret accepting the Epstein case. You felt you were misled in 2005. If that's the case, does that not at the very least warrant criticism that sort of you allowed yourself to believe that story? You told the New Yorker it amounted to, when you were taking it, only half a dozen accusers who were under the age that slipped through the cracks. And when you later learned the extent of this, you were shocked. You wrote to prosecutors in 2007 that Epstein, quote, never targeted minors. How could you have believed that with all the evidence that existed back then? The Palm Beach Post wrote in 2006, police interviewed 5 alleged victims and 17 witnesses. The report shows some of the girls said they had been instructed to have sex with another woman in front of Epstein, and one said she had direct intercourse with him. Basically, the question is, if you're challenging people to say, there's no substantive criticism, but you also say that you regret taking the case, is that not sort of a realm of substantive criticism?
I don't regret taking the case on principle ground. I would take it again today, a comparable case. I'm sure John Adams regretted taking the case of the Boston Massacre people because people attacked him for it.
Right.
I only regret taking the case because of what's happened to my family. It was the right thing to do. Lawyers must take controversial cases. The more controversial, the more the defendant is hated, the more I'll take the case. I defended communists in the 50s, Nazis in the 70s. I defended Ted Kennedy for driving off Chappaquiddick. I defended Bill Clinton. I've defended everybody who is Mike Tyson. I've defended people who are controversial, O.J. Simpson. That's the right thing to do. There is no substantive criticism of that. The fact that I might have thought differently about it if I had known the facts at the time. I didn't know the facts at the time. At the time I took the Epstein case, his friends included the president of Harvard, the provost of Harvard, the man who decoded the genome. Some of the most important academics in the world were close to him. He had given money to Harvard. I had no idea. None of these people had any idea about his private life. He kept it completely separate. So the only regret I have is what's happened to my family. I have no principled regret. From a principled point of view, everybody's entitled to a defense, and I will continue to provide defenses to everybody as long as the good Lord gives me the power to do so. So no, I did absolutely nothing wrong.
And in the Epstein case, unlike the other cases that you just mentioned, that it actually drew you in, or you yourself were accused by Virginia Giuffre of some misconduct.
No rational person believes that, although it's part of the attack on lawyers. I mean, her own lawyer admitted to me in a tape-recorded conversation that she was wrong and there was no basis for it. We have all the travel records that prove that she lied. She herself, has lied over and over and over again.
So she lied about everything, or just lied about?
Say it again.
Did she
say it again?
She's a total liar. Everything she says is a lie, or just the parts of what she said that have to do with how she accused you?
Well, all I know is about me, and if she lied categorically about me, why should anybody believe anything she said about anybody? I have no idea whether anything else she said is true or false. She accused Ehud Barak, George Mitchell. She accused Bill Richardson. She accused, most significantly, she accused Al Gore. She said that Al Gore was on Epstein's island. Al Gore never met Epstein. In fact, her own lawyer was Al Gore's lawyer. Could have simply made a phone call, as we did, and find out Al Gore was never there. And yet for $160,000, she described in detail a dinner with Al and Tipper Gore. Totally made up story. So there's nothing that she ever says that should be believed. Does that mean that nothing happened to her? No, maybe it did, but it should be proved by other evidence. Nobody should believe anything she ever said. She has a long history of lying. She lied about her age. She said she was 14 and 15 when she met Epstein. She was 17. Everything out of her mouth has been a lie. And I'm not worried about that. There's a trial, and at the trial we'll prove her long history of lying, and will prove that I couldn't have been anywhere near any of the places she said she had sex with me. But that will await a trial. But people aren't canceling me for that. People are canceling me largely because of my defense of Trump, because of what CNN said, I said on the night I answered questions about Trump. So it's much more political than it is personal. I have led a completely honorable personal life, and nobody is going to be able to disprove that in any way. And I've led a completely honorable professional life, and I'm going to continue to do so. And if people criticize me, it's clearly because of who I represented.
And I want to pick up on your point about the travel records. And you've said in the past that she can't connect you in any way, any sense that you might have met before. I haven't heard you respond directly to this, and I wanted to give you a chance. There's in the travel records, it says on December 11th, 2000, the Epstein plane leaves Florida for New York City. You're living in New York at the time. Then on the next day, December 12th, the calendar says a 1:30 meeting with, quote, Jeff. We don't know what Jeff that is. People could speculate. And then at 12:13 on December 13th, the next day, it says 10 a.m. scheduled a massage with AD, presumably Alan Dershowitz. 14th, the plane leaves.
That was in my wife's calendar. My wife scheduled a massage. If you think my wife scheduled a massage with an underage sex slave, then you'll believe anything. No, we lived in New York.
Other calendar entries.
Let me finish.
You guys clarify that other calendar entries had a collective.
Let me finish.
Go ahead.
I was a visiting scholar at NYU. My wife had a professional masseuse. We have checks, canceled checks, proving that the massage occurred, when it occurred, who it occurred with, and I've had very, very few massages in my life. One at Jeffrey Epstein's house by a middle-aged woman who gave me a shoulder and neck massage, which I hated. I called up my wife and complained about it immediately. No, I've done nothing wrong. If you want to put me on trial here, you have to give me an opportunity to fully explain. You will not be able to make just charges against me without giving me an opportunity to explain.
You had a massage at Jeffrey Epstein's house?
Do you know who it was who performed that?
Yes. I mean, we know approximately who it was. There were a lot of people around her. We think we remember, and the person who was in charge of the Epstein house confirmed this, that it's a woman named Olga who was in her 40s and was a professional massage therapist. I had a neck and back problem at the time, and I had a massage. My wife had a massage. My daughter had a massage. My grandchildren stayed in Jeffrey Epstein's house when he was away. And if any of those allegations are true, do you think I would allow my grandchildren, my daughter, my son? It's absurd, and it will be proved at trial. But if you want to accuse me, I must have every opportunity to respond. Go ahead.
Well, so yeah, the Miami Herald reported that the non-prosecution deal. Like, again, I don't think you'll find us questioning John Adams' decision to defend the British in the Boston Massacre. I think we're all on the same.
You would have if you were here today.
I don't think you know that, sir, but I think we're all on the same page as you. I wish the ACLU were what it used to be. The Miami Herald reported that the non-prosecution deal that you helped secure, it was your job to do this, essentially shut down an ongoing FBI probe into whether there were more victims and other powerful people who took part in Epstein's sex crimes. Was that your goal? Does that not suggest you knew that other accusers and perpetrators were out there if you secured a non-prosecution deal that was, from the perspective of a lawyer, great work, right? This is doing your client. This is exactly what you would want to do for your client as a lawyer. But does it suggest that a deal that's that strong, you didn't know that there would be other people down the road?
The other people down the road were three women who worked for Jeffrey Epstein. They were named in the original letter. We know who they are. And the investigation didn't end. It continued, and it culminated, obviously, in his indictment in New York and his suicide. Jeffrey Epstein thought I did a terrible job for him. He fired me, refused to pay my fee, and we didn't get along. He thought we could have gotten a better deal. I thought we got a pretty good deal. That's my job, to get a pretty good deal. Yes, I plead guilty to getting him a good deal. I've gotten good deals for many people who've committed far worse crimes. I've saved people from the death penalty. I've saved people from life imprisonment. That's been my job. I probably have one of the best records of any criminal appellate lawyer in modern history. I'm very proud of the work I've done, and I've represented some of the people who are most hated in America. That's my job. That's what Abraham Lincoln did. That's what Daniel Webster did. That's what Thurgood Marshall did. That's what Bennett Williams did. And that's what I did to great praise until I defended Donald Trump. By the way, the Epstein thing got me no cancellations on Martha's Vineyard, for example. It was only the Trump thing.
That's a great point.
That's a great point. That's an excellent point.
Go ahead.
Yeah, do you think...
Ask me any hard questions. I have not refused to answer a single question because I have absolutely nothing to hide. I want every document revealed in the Epstein case. My false accusers and their lawyers want to hide everything. There are depositions that should be made public that are, you'll have to make your own judgment about them. But there are good reasons why the other side wants to keep them secret. Ultimately, they'll all come out and they will all exculpate me. I am 100% innocent of any possible charges. I have never had sex with anybody other than my wife during the relevant period of time. We've just celebrated our 36th wedding anniversary. I love my wife. I'm very proud of her. Epstein knew that. He would never in a trillion years have suggested that I do anything improper and violate my wife's trust in me.
Do you think he actually did kill himself, and is there any chance he was an asset for law enforcement or national security, and that's why it's so difficult? He was so protected. It's been so hard to hold all these people, famous, rich people accountable who've been associated with him?
I think I know for relative certain that he was not an asset. He was certainly not an Israeli intelligence asset. I don't think he was an American intelligence asset. I think he probably committed suicide, but I think he probably gets some assistance in doing so. There were too many coincidences about videos being shut off. So I'm not sure. I had very little contact with him after the time I represented him. That is the last, 10 or 12 years of his life. So we had very little contact. He didn't like me. He didn't think I did a good job. And, what he did is something that the evidence will have to show, but I don't have any special evidence. I do know that he was a hedonist, and the idea of him spending the rest of his life behind bars is probably not something that he was prepared to face. So he certainly had a motive to commit suicide.
And so your new book is highly critical of cancel culture. It praises people who stand up on principle. And in that context, I wanted to ask you about your own kind of leading of a cancellation. If you 2005 to 2007, you had this high-profile fight with another academic, Norm Finkelstein.
He's not an academic. He's
not an academic because you successfully blocked him from getting tenure.
No, I had nothing to do with it. Let me tell you exactly.
You sent a letter to the university urging them not to give you tenure.
No. They solicited a letter from me. That happens all the time. What happened is he wrote a book attacking me. He called my book, The Case for Israel, a fraud. He said it was written by the Mossad. And so the university wrote to me and asked me to give my assessment about his academic credibility. And as I've done 100 times for other people, I wrote a scholarly letter assessing his credibility. They then made a decision based on a range of factors. In fact, they told me my letter played very, very little role. I'm very pleased for the fact that he was denied tenure. He didn't deserve tenure. He was not a serious academic. He was a polemical, radical extremist who hadn't written any serious books. His books were panned by the New York Times, called terrible, terrible books. And so, again, I'm proud of the role I played in the Norman Finkelstein case. And I would continue to play roles like that. As an academic, I would give a fair and honest assessment. I obviously exposed in the letter my own point of view, knowing that I was one of the people that was attacked. But he accused me of The Case for Israel, which was a major bestseller and an important book. He accused me of having had it ghostwritten by the Mossad. I mean, that kind of allegation and charge is not consistent with tenure at a major university.
But your letter was reviewed by the tenure committee, and the tenure committee still voted.
And
the tenure committee still voted to give him tenure. It was only then at the higher level, at the administrative, more political level, that by a single vote he was denied.
I don't know why you say at the more political level. It was the academic level. It was an academic decision not to give him tenure. Giving him tenure would have been a really bad decision based on his scholarship. I urge you to read his books.
Sure.
Read the reviews of his books. Nobody with books like that and reviews like that would ever get tenure at a major university. It would just be unthinkable.
In general, there's a sense among a lot of people that the most vocal critics of cancel culture are willing to make an exception for advocates of Palestinian rights.
I make no exceptions for Palestinian rights. When Yasser Arafat died, Palestinian students came to me and asked me to represent them in an effort to fly the Palestinian flag at Harvard. I said I would, and I said I would attend the event, let them fly the Palestinian flag. I handed out a leaflet about Yasser Arafat's crimes and let people judge for themselves. I don't apply a different standard to the Palestinians. I believe in the two-state solution. I believe in a Palestinian state, disarmed, unable to make attacks on Israel. I've always regarded myself as pro-Israel, pro-Palestine. I make no exceptions whatsoever.
Something really interesting you said earlier about you weren't canceled on Martha's Vineyard until you defended Trump. And I want to pick up on that point as we sort of wrap up, because it's interesting. Earlier, you also said at the time when you were, when you were involved with Jeffrey Epstein professionally, socially, in different ways, you saw he had all of these powerful acquaintances, all of these people, all of the powerful scientists, the Steven Pinkers of the world, Bill Gates. People had sort of flocked to Jeffrey Epstein because he was seen as a benefactor.
Steve Pinker didn't like him. He never got along with him.
Sure, but still, people affiliating with Jeffrey Epstein.
Well, we all went to seminars that were conducted at the Harvard University.
Sure.
There were like 15 people going to these seminars, including the president of the university and Nobel Prize winners.
Right. That's exactly my point.
I look forward to these seminars. They were very, very thoughtful and enjoyable.
That's exactly my point. Yeah. So it's interesting then that part of what allowed Epstein to fly under the radars of people who were affiliating with him was those powerful affiliations with others. It was the fact that he was running in elite circles.
That would put him over the radar.
And
his affiliation with others. It didn't. Look, he was affiliated with Bill Clinton very closely. He flew Bill Clinton around the world. Nobody knew about this. It wasn't that he was able to fly under the radar because people like Bill Clinton.
Bill Clinton is pictured getting a massage from a young woman. I mean, Bill Clinton, if Bill Clinton didn't know the extent of it, I'm open to that idea. But Bill Clinton has pictured himself getting a massage from a woman who sure looks underage. And if she's not, she's certainly close to it. But the point is,
I never heard about that. I can tell you that I was at Caroline Kennedy's house having dinner with Bill Clinton when he was president, and a phone call came in, and it was Jeffrey Epstein. And he was on the phone with Epstein at Caroline Kennedy's house for about, 20 minutes. A lot of people were affiliating with Epstein because of his charitable contributions and his academic work, but nobody, as far as I know, knew about this. Again, the same woman accused Al Gore of being on Epstein's island. We now have categorical evidence he wasn't. She also said that Bill Clinton was on the island having dinner with underage girls and that he was flown there by Ghislaine Maxwell, who had just gotten a pilot's license, as if the Secret Service would ever allow a president or a former president
but they could get him on the phone in a minute's notice. It's still pretty. Okay, so if some of it is not true, but it's still incredible for a lot of us that he had this level of access to so many famous people, powerful people, to the president of the United States.
And it was all cut off the minute he was accused. As soon as he was accused, almost everybody cut off their relations because they didn't know. You could say the same thing.
You still went to his house after he got out of prison.
Say it again.
You did still provide legal advice. You went to his mansion after he got out of prison.
If I got a call from him from hell today, I would still provide legal advice. I'm obligated to. I was his lawyer. The legal advice I provided had to do solely with the deal that was made, and I would still provide legal advice.
You did still provide legal advice. You went to his mansion after he got out of prison.
If I got a call from him from hell today, I would still provide legal advice. I'm obligated to. I was his lawyer.
After he got out of prison.
If I got a call from him from hell today, I would still provide legal advice. I'm obligated to. I was his lawyer. The legal advice I provided had to do solely with the deal that was made and the implications of the deal. I'm sorry, I'm not like a doctor in Cambridge who walked away from a patient in the middle of an operation. That's not the way I practice law, and that's not the way any decent person practices law.
On the point about nobody knowing, nobody having an idea, Donald Trump in an interview, in the 1990s, I think it was in Vanity Fair, said, "Oh yeah, Jeffrey Epstein, he really likes young girls, like
some on the younger side."
He likes them on the younger side. This was.
No, I'm sure that's right. I'm sure Donald Trump saw him with people on the young side, people in their 20s. When he came to my house for the first time, he was introduced to me by the lady Lynn Rothschild, a very eminent, prominent person. He came to the house and he was with I think a 28 or 29-year-old woman. My wife commented, "Boy, she's really young." And yes, he did associate with women in their 20s. One of them was a Harvard business school student. His father owned a bank in Germany. Yes, that was his reputation, but nobody that I know knew that he associated with people in their teens. If I had ever seen that, I would have not only walked out, I would have called the police, because that wouldn't be lawyer-client privilege. I never would have seen him again. And I'm sure that's true of many other people, though I can speak for myself.
If Donald Trump is defining the younger side, I would think that's teens. Like for Donald Trump, 20s is.
Well, let's talk to him about that. Yeah. I obviously wasn't aware of that.
Have you ever talked to Donald Trump since you defended him against the impeachment charges, which I agreed were insane? Have you ever talked to him about Epstein?
Certainly not since that time. I spoke to him about Epstein one time, just when he was being investigated or something. And it was it was just, how's Epstein doing? And I said, I don't know. I haven't seen him in a long time.
Interesting.
That was the only conversation I had with him.
Interesting. Well, Professor Dershowitz, thank you for your time. Thank you for your candor. Thank you for answering our questions.
Well, thank you for your hard questions. I enjoy hard questions because I have nothing to hide. I've never refused to answer a question. Now I wish you'd have Virginia Gouffre or David Boies on your program and ask them.
We'd love to have them on.
Ask them why they're not revealing the affidavit, why they're hiding her deposition. Ask why they're hiding her deposition, why they're hiding other documents, why they're refusing to put them forward. Most of us on our side, on the civil liberties side, want to see transparency. I want to see transparency on the affidavit for the Mar-a-Lago search, and I want to see transparency in the Epstein case. I want to see everything come out, because I'm not afraid of the truth coming out. I said from day one, I hope there are videotapes. I hope every aspect of Epstein's life was videotaped. I hope the government has videotapes of every sexual encounter that was ever performed in Epstein's house. All of that would vindicate me. I want the truth to come out. That's why I'm willing to be on your show and answer any questions about any subject.
Well, the book is The Price of Principle, Why Integrity is Worth the Consequences. Alan Dershowitz, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Trapped there, Epstein and Ghislaine came, I think, 3 to 4 times during her 3-month stay there. And on the last day, they tried to rape her. Both of them.
Both of them tried
Maxwell
to rape her.
and Epstein. Mm-hmm.
And what happened then?
Well, so when we talked, she jumped around a lot from different topics, from this to that. From what I understand, after that, they ended up leaving. She called the police. And the police basically said they weren't going to come help her because they work for Wexner. They work at his gate at the estate, and to stop calling, basically.
And how old was she when this was happening?
She was an adult, but I don't know how. The thing is, she was an adult when this happened, but they took her sister. They kidnapped her sister, and she was 15.
When did they kidnap her sister?
I'd have to look back at my notes, because it's a long story. I mean, 3.5 hours.
No,
right?
of course.
And this was just yesterday.
Yeah.
Right? But I mean, the mainstream media, the New York Times, basically makes the story sound like, oh, she went to Wexner's house to paint a mural, and Epstein hired her, and then Epstein tried to put his hands on her, and then she called the cops, and that was it.
Right.
No. And apparently at some point, this bodyguard for Wexner, who's former special forces military guy, who's now Will Smith's bodyguard, he basically came over and was like, you're never leaving here, and was basically I'm going to kill you. And the only reason she said she made it out is because there was a landline in that house, and she called literally everyone she had ever met in her entire life.
Wow.
her entire, like her whole family, as many people as she could, saying they are trying to kill me.
Now,
and because they saw her making a stink with all these cameras, they ended up letting her go. And she said to me, I was an adult at the time. What if I had been one of those preteen girls or one of those younger kids? What would have happened to me?
Did she ever see any notable people, any bold-faced names with Epstein and Ghislaine that would be surprising to anybody?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that shocked me, honestly, is that she said that in New York, Ghislaine would go to these, like, around the time school would get out, to like middle schools. She would like drive around and say that she was recruiting models for Victoria's Secret, and would go up to like all these 12-year-old girls with like braces and stuff in school uniforms. But she almost always went to do this with Ivana Trump, Trump's ex-wife. And said that they were together all the time in this, going around in cars, talking to these young girls, and that they would exchange information. And the next day those girls would be in Epstein's office.
So she would go around to, I imagine, were these prep schools? Are these public? I mean,
I don't know exactly what type of school it was, but
it's hard to imagine that they're going to very wealthy schools, because then the parents of those kids would also be sort of powerful and connected people. But who knows? Who knows? But so she was going to junior high schools, middle schools with Ivana Trump, and saying she was recruiting girls for Victoria. Wait, what was she recruiting girls for?
Ghislaine told Maria, because Maria would come along in the car. They'd be like, "Come with us." Like Ghislaine would take her shopping and all this stuff. She'd be like, "Get in the car, let's go,"
Right.
And she would like stay in the car and like see these exchanges happen, But one thing she did tell me is that they asked the kids about their grades. They only wanted the kids with good grades. They wanted smart kids, and they wanted talented kids, like creative kids.
And she would say, I'm recruiting for a modeling agency, and she would do this with Ivana Trump. Yeah, I mean, it's satanic. It's horrible. It's evil. Ivana Trump, what's the angle there? I mean, does her name come up? Yeah.
I honestly don't know, because it had never come up before, but she was like, I want her to explain herself. Why was she always there? And why was she always going around with Ghislaine with these kids? Why was she involved? Like, she should explain herself. That's what Maria said.
Are there a lot of photos with Ghislaine and Ivana Trump? I haven't seen any, but that doesn't mean they don't exist.
I believe so.
Yeah,
but,
okay.
I mean, I'd have to go. There's pictures of Ghislaine and Trump from like the early 90s and all that stuff. So I really honestly wouldn't be this surprising. This was like mid 90s, right? This is like 95. Right. By the time it hit like 2000 and so, like the Trump-Epstein relationship sort of started to get rocky.
It started to degenerate. Why? Why exactly did it start to get rocky?
Well, from what I understand, it was sort of competition about real estate at some point. There was this mansion in Palm Beach that Epstein wanted to buy and flip, and then he showed it to Trump and asked his opinion, and then Trump ended up taking it from Epstein or something like that, some sort of like real estate
marksmanship, gamesmanship.
Yeah, I don't know. And so they got mad at each other, and apparently after Trump did that to Epstein tried to like set him up or something with some sort of like blackmail thing.
So Maria, when did Maria start figuring out that, hey, this is not a modeling agency. These aren't talent scouts. These people are pedophiles. Did she figure it out before was it the rape in Ohio that did it, the attempted rape, or she had no?
Yeah, that's what she said.
Yes. Okay.
She said during the attempted rape, she said everything like that started to click, all this weird stuff she'd seen, and just like didn't understand, just thought they were like just weird, total weirdos. When she was being assaulted, it just clicked. She's like, these people have been around my sister, who's way younger than her. Right. These people have been around my sister. And then she said that she, out of nowhere, had this feeling that they'd taken these pictures she had of her sisters that were like hidden in like the basement of this guest house. She like had all her stuff there, like super organized. And because she was an artist, she had like some pictures of like her younger sisters like half naked for like anatomy stuff, but she always painted them with their clothes on. And apparently they had gone in there and taken the pictures. And after she escaped that mess, barely, she called Epstein's office trying to get those pictures back. And eventually someone called her back and said, don't try and get the pictures back. They're in his briefcase and he's using them. And then she hung up.
How long did you work for him in total?
It was 1995 to 1996, when that, when she was assaulted. I don't know exactly what month she began. I had to do a follow-up call with her. It was just taking it all in at once, I mean,
yeah.
I was just like, tell me whatever you want to tell me,
Yeah.
I was like, I have all afternoon. Let's go.
What else? Did she say anything?
Follow-up
Yeah.
stuff. Mm-hmm.
What else do you remember in terms of disturbing or, things that you had not necessarily heard before?
Well, there's a clip for this one.
Yeah.
She said the FBI was just as abusive to her as Epstein and Maxwell,
Right.
which is just insane, since that's supposed to be the institution that protects people like this.
Yeah, nobody listening to this show believes that. I'll tell you that much. I'm sure there are people out there that believe that. Nobody listening to this show. Let's play that clip, because that's an interesting clip to get into. Did they, after she left, was that the end of contact she had with them after the assault and they finally let her out? Did she have any further contact with them?
Yeah.
Okay.
She said that when she went back to New York after that whole incident in Ohio, that Epstein stalked her and followed her around.
Very creepy. All right, we're going to play the clip now. Here's the FBI clip.
I mean, I can't even explain to you how abusive the FBI is. It's unbelievable to me. I mean, they, first of all, never offered me witness protection. And when I first called them, they knew I was telling. Believe me, they knew they knew everything I was telling them. They already knew, because they're in on it. And it was so weird, his reactions when I was talking to him. I called and I got some answer guy, and then he passes me to some guy who's like, when I start talking about Wexner, and I asked the guy, this is all over the phone in 1996. I said, do you have a file on Les Wexner? And he said, why? And I said, he's the head of the snake in America. And I don't even know I was intuiting this. And also, I think it's common sense when you see all the stuff going on. And anyway, when I said that to him, he said, yeah, I don't know, maybe we do. And I said, well, these people are using child pornography, and they've stolen photographs of my sisters. That right there would have been life in prison for Jeffrey and Ghislaine. I still have the envelopes with their touch DNA and fingerprints on them, and the FBI will not take them from me. They never would. They would never take the envelopes that they stole. I mean, they photographs out of these envelopes, and I have proof. I still have the envelopes, Whitney. And the FBI was like, yeah, no, we don't need that. They also knew in 1996 that I'd been trafficked and Annie had been trafficked, and that would have been enough to put them away. But they never cared. They didn't care. And the worst part was I named everybody. I named Donald Trump. I named everyone who I thought was a co-conspirator at the time. So I named Alan Dershowitz, Donald Trump, absolutely the Clintons. These are people that I saw coming and going, that I knew were part of it. And I made it really clear that this is a very scary thing for children, and that I see between 5 and 10 girls a day going upstairs. And now that I know what's happening to them, I want it stopped. And
that's where it's supposed to go.
Yeah. I mean, this is just mind-blowing stuff. When she says that she tells the FBI that, she has information on people that are trafficking children and they do nothing. And we've heard this before. We heard it with the Franklin scandal. There's been many other pedophile rings in the UK, the Kincora Boys Home in the UK, North Fox Island, another much smaller, but also wealthy, powerful people abusing children. The Franklin scandal is the big, from the 80s and 90s, is the huge precursor to Epstein, where you had a very politically connected figure doing the same exact thing. What is your belief when you zoom out for a minute and you look at...
But he did tell people that were affiliated with the committee that Gary Caradori had definitely been assassinated.
Damn.
So, and there were a lot of other suspicious deaths in the Franklin scandal. I mean, every chapter there's a strange death or two. Pseudo suicides and things like that. Yeah.
Jesus Christ, man, that's nuts. And the Rusty guy, that's the guy you were driving with and got pulled over with?
Yes, I was. I myself was looking for blackmail pictures, and which I don't know if that was very prudent, but I was. And Rusty said that he had some. Now, Rusty is a guy that he takes blackmail pictures of adults and children engaged in sexual
how do you get into that?
I guess.
Yeah, how do you get into it?
Water rises to its own level, I guess. I mean, it's like, so I relationship would be too strong, but I forged kind of an alliance with Rusty because he was having a lot of problems with legal problems, and I said that I would help pay for his legal bills. All he had to do was provide me with blackmail pictures, which he said he had. So he took me on a wild goose chase to get blackmail pictures, and we didn't get any. And then I was driving him home on this desolate highway, and we got pulled over. And I started the Franklin scandal out with this is the cops, I show the cops my ID, and he doesn't even look at it. He says, "Get out of the car." And then he deposits me in his car, and then he runs me through, and I'm clean. But then he runs Rusty Nelson through, and then there's a lot of numbers after him, and I'm sure that they weren't nice numbers. So they take Rusty out, and then they rip apart the car that I rented, and all they found was my ginseng root. So that was about it. But Rusty gave me a lot of insight. I would never use Rusty as a sole source, but Rusty gave me a lot of insight because one day I asked him, how does this work? And he said, it's like you're on a yacht, and it's a beautiful day, and you can have anything you want on this yacht. But if you decide to get off the yacht, the people on the yacht are going to make sure that you drown.